Hi everybody, today in math class we looked at the relationship of addition and subtraction. So let's take a look at some examples that we actually worked through in math class today. It says, number 1, draw tape diagrams to represent each of the following number sentences. 3 plus 5 minus 5 equals 3. So if we were to make tape diagrams and we start out with 3, it would just be 3 rectangles. And then if we're adding 5 to that, we could show a couple different ways that we also added on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'd have our 3 plus we'd have our 5. Now, if I wanted to take 5 away, so plus 3 plus 5 minus 5, if I took that 5 away then, I would be back to where we started, which is 3. So I started with 3, I added 5 more on, I took the 5 away, I'm back with my original 3. Let's look at letter B. 8 minus 2 plus 2 equals 8. All right, so I need to start with 8. Go in half. So I have 8. If I take 2 away, this is what I would end up with. And then if I had to add my 2 back on, I'd be here again. So I had 8, I subtracted 2, and then when I was done, I ended up with 8 again after I added the 2 back on. So that's just a real basic visual of what the tape diagrams would look like. So what we were looking for is the relationships. What were we doing that we could kind of bring back to some mathematical knowledge to find out some identities or something that's happening? So for example, if we look right here, number 2 says fill in each blank. If I start with 65 and I add something to it, but then take away 15, I'm back at 65. Well, here I added on 5 and then took 5 away, and I was back at 3. So for this one, it must be I'm adding 15. So add 15, then take that 15 away, I'm back to where I started with. Letter B has variables. So numbers, these are letters that could represent any number that we wanted to put in there. So if I start off with something and I add G to it, but then I take G away, the same number, I end up with K. Well, up above in letter A, it showed when I started with 65, I ended with 65, and I added 15, subtracted 15. So I could use the same sort of thought process for what would be going on here. So if I end with K, I must have had to start with it. So I've got another one that looks like that. A plus B minus something will give me an A. So if I want to, I'm ending with A, which is what I started with, but if I added B, to be back where I started with, I have to subtract B. And the last one, 367 minus 93, but then plus 93. So I took it away, but then I added back to it. I'm right back to the original number I started with. So that is what we worked on in class. And so we need to look at finding what are these identities. So let's take a look at some questions here. In every problem that we did today, why did the final value of the expression equal the initial expression? The initial one's the one we started with, and it's because the overall change was 0. So when I took a look at problem A, we added 5, then we took 5 away. So if I add 5, then I take 5 away, that is the same as adding 0. Down here, I subtracted 2, but then I put 2 back on. That's the same as adding 0. Same thing with everything over here. So the change is 0. They cancel each other out. All right, and initially, we added an amount and then subtracted the same amount. Later in the lesson, we subtracted an amount and then added the same amount. Did that change? And we had that with one of the examples as well. And we've discovered it does not change the outcome because in both cases, we end up with the same value we started with. And then finally, why were we able to evaluate the final expression even when we didn't know the amount that we were adding and subtracting? Because when we add and subtract the same value, it's similar to adding 0 to an expression because the two numbers are opposites, which have the sum of 0. So when you add the opposites, it equals 0. Add opposites equal 0. They zero each other out. They cancel each other out. So hopefully that will help you understand what we're doing today. So basically, we're looking at the addition and subtraction property, identity property of 0. If you add or subtract 0 to any number, you get the same original number that you started with. It keeps its identity. So it's the property of identity. Adding or subtracting 0 from any number gets you the number you started with. So even if we actually didn't add 0, we subtracted 2 and then added 2, or we added 5 and then subtracted 5. Because of them canceling it out, it's the same as adding or subtracting 0. So I hope this helps. Good luck with your practice.